Hi, I'm John Stoll with Dolan Bailey, Director of Fresh Meats and Sustainable Programs. And now we're going to break this forequarter into individual cuts. We're going to start with the rib. We're going to pull the rib off, and Ryan LaRock, our production manager, is going to be doing that. And so he's going to make a cut down along here and then pull this rib off at that point. So go ahead, Ryan. Right now he's pulling off the outside skirt. And that's a really nice piece of meat for can be grilled once it's cleaned off once you clean off the fat and skin. Makes a really nice steakable cut. He's going to count down the number of ribs. 7.
7.
And this is a primal rib, something you probably don't see in the supermarket, because we're going to break it down and take some of the cat meat and cut these down and pull the bones off. We'll make a boneless ribeye, which you'll see a boneless ribeye roast or steaks. What's left here on the carcass is the chuck on this particular portion. So as he breaks this rest of it down, this is going to be the chuck, which we're going to break down into some other cuts as well. So now he's going to pull some cuts out of the shoulder. We're going to make a clawed heart out of the shoulder. So he's just kind of cutting right along the blade bone and pulling that arm off. This is the shoulder clod that he's going to pull off. Teres major, that's a relatively new cut, something that a lot of people haven't seen. It's a very tender piece of meat. Can be used for steaks. Cut the whole thing and make it a steak. It's very tender, has a lot of flavor. Sometimes called a petite tender or shoulder tender. Now he's going to pull the brisket off. So just following the outline of that heavy muscle there. And then he's going to go right down that backbone.
That's the whole brisket.
That's the whole brisket, and then it'll be cleaned up into what you're used to seeing in the store. This is the sternum. All right, he's just pulling some cat meat off. Just to clean it up. Most of it's going to be for lean trim for ground beef. Now what he's pulling off now is what we call a corner piece. It's a rib, short rib. It's the meatiest part of the short rib pieces. This is the rib side. This is the chuck side. So there's a chuck short rib and a rib short rib. The rib has more meat on it. This particular muscle along here is the key. The thicker it is, the more meaty the short rib. And on the chuck side, it tends to be a little thinner. So we typically just use that mostly for grinding, but we'll pull some of that off and use for short rib as well. The boneless short rib piece will come off as a corner of that. And most of the rest of these pieces he's pulling off, he's just going to pull off some trim for grinding. Okay, now we're going to start breaking apart the hind quarter. And he's just going to pull some cuts off that are going to go more into grind for trim, just so he can get to the cuts he wants. The first thing he's going to pull off is the flank, and that's kind of the area that he's working on now. What he's got there is the rough flank. There's a lot of this is the flank that you're used to seeing. He's going to clean the rest of that up, and that's what we'll wind up with. As you can imagine, the key to this process is having a sharp knife and keeping it sharp. That's what's called the kidney fat that he just pulled off there. Now it exposes here the tenderloin, which is the most tender muscle in the animal. So now he's separating the sirloin from the round. Now he's going to be pulling the tenderloin off of the edge of the spine. So that is the rough tenderloin that he'll clean up. And be more recognizable when he's done. But that's the most expensive and the most tender muscle on the animal. That's what you make the filet mignon. Next thing he's going to pull off is the strip loin, which you use to make New York strip steaks. And that's the strip loin, the bone-in strip loin. We're going to be pulling off the top sirloin butt. Typically, you see those in the store as sirloin steaks, top sirloin steaks, top sirloin fillet, sometimes it's called. It's a tender piece of meat. It's not as tender as the strip or the tenderloin. It has a lot more flavor. Has a little bit more bite to it, but it's a little tougher as it comes to a part of the animal that moves around more. And there's the top sirloin. Now what's left here is a round. Sometimes you've seen that if you go to hotels and functions, you see what's called a steamship round, where they just trim this down a little bit to where they can hang on to it and then carve this off. Sometimes you'll see that at a hotel or a party or function. We're actually going to break it down into some other individual cuts. But if you got a really big oven, you could cook this whole thing and make a steamship round out of it. Okay, first part he's going to pull off is a peeled knuckle, which is the other half of the muscle of the top sirloin. Probably one of the more tender muscles of the round, but there's a lot of connective tissue and heavy muscles in it. It's really best to be roasted or braised. And there it is. So the cuts that are left that he's going to be pulling off is the bottom round flat and the eye round. Again, mostly roasting cuts, different sizes. And the top round. The top round is you can actually cut some steaks off of a top round. They're a little tougher. Best to be used for like a London broil. You can cut them across the grain and make strips that you could make a London broil out of. That's a pretty common use for the top round. And again, if you see deli roast beef in the supermarkets, usually they use a top round, roast that off, and then slice it thin for the deli sandwich style. And there it is. What we're left with is the shank, which is really great tasting meat. It just needs to be slow cooked and really taken care of for a long time. But we cut it into strips. He's pulling the heel meat off, which we'll just use for our ground beef trim. Okay, so that's pretty much how we break it into the major subprimals. So that's pretty much the whole carcass, start to finish.